The Book of the Dead.
Gosh darn it.
By Charles Fort. Part 3. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels, demons, and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. So I just got back from a trip. One of the Contact at the Cabin events. It was a lot of fun. It was called Magic on the Mountain. And it was great. You know, these events are always really, really excellent in terms of the people that show up. And Brandon Powell was there, and so of course I brought my drum. And Brandon and I rocked out each morning doing the breath work. That was really cool. It's a lot of fun. Had to wrap my fingers though, you know.
Yeah, I bet.
Tend to
hadn't been jamming in a while.
Hadn't been jamming, and and rocking out with Brandon. And tend to really rock out.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So that was really cool, and we also had Joe and Owen, the two guys that were the presenters, and they did some great presentations on magic and manifestation and self-help and self-improvement. Really cool stuff. And we also went to the Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona, which was amazing. Absolutely amazing stuff to walk amongst. I mean, you're just out in the desert, and it's really desert. Like, it's sandy.
Barren.
Yeah, barren. It's very close to some of the painted desert area. So one of the first places you stop is like painted desert.
Yeah.
And you kind of look out over that, and it's, very colorful, and then you drive down. And so it's just sandy, sort of loamy, ashy hills with very few, there's scrubs and some stickers, but really not a whole lot of plant life. And then in this one fairly large area were just thousands of gigantic, fully crystallized, petrified logs of as I was reading, it was hard to tell when you're looking at them, but the information says up to 8 different species of conifer trees, and some of them are 3 or 4 feet in diameter.
Wow.
So really beautiful, and then multiple colors.
So what are they saying? It was millions and millions and millions and millions of years old?
Yes.
Was it high elevation at the time, or snowy, or
Oh, you mean what was the climate there at the time?
Yeah.
Well, they're supposed to be 225 million years old.
Wow.
So we're talking mid-Triassic, right? And also the stuff I was reading about it said that this would also have been during one of the Pangea periods where all the continents were kind of smashed together, and this would have been in the southwestern part of that, kind of inland. So these were supposed to have been buried in
like a volcanic ash or something.
Yeah, but lake/river sediments that were that were full of volcanic ash and pyroclastic material. So the idea is that there was some kind of big flood that ripped a bunch of the logs out of the forest that they were
floated them somewhere.
Flooded them down, and that's what shredded them of all their branches and bark, right? And there were also simultaneous giant volcanic eruptions that then they get in a log jam or something, and then the log jam ends out in a lake.
Yeah.
And then all this ash and material from the volcano falls onto them, and they kind of get embedded into that, and it's really high in silicates, so they fully crystallize. Cool stuff. I don't know. It was really kind of amazing to walk around. There were multiple stops in the park. The last 2 were the best ones. The Jasper Forest is the second to last stop. And
my gosh. Wow,
and then the final stop is Crystal Forest. And the Crystal Forest, there's a winding walkway path that is probably over a mile long that just goes up and down through these sandy, sandy is the wrong word. It's like dried mud, grayish dried mud. And then there was so much fragments of petrified wood like there were whole logs. You could see that they used to be all one piece. Most of them had been broken into a bunch of fragments, but they're all laying in a row. And in other cases, they're scattered around. And in some cases, they were so shattered and fragmented that it was like mulch, except that it was stone.
Crystal mulch.
Yeah. Crystallized mulch. So yeah, the trip was really great. And I think
I wonder if that mulch like stops the crystals from growing through it.
Yeah. Well, there were no weeds growing through that mulch. I can tell you that.
But, yeah, petrified weeds can't grow through petrified mulch.
That's right. So yeah, the event was so successful that Darian almost immediately set up another one, and this one's going to be at Mount Shasta. So that ought to be a lot of fun. So that'll be next year, and I think he's already taking deposits. So if you're interested in doing it, Mount Shasta, Magic on the Mountain next year. And I told him, like, hey, if we're doing Shasta, we ought to do Rainier after that. We'll go up to Washington. So yeah, maybe we'll go to Shasta and do some summoning magic and open up the door.
Maybe I should do a presentation on my theories about magic.
You could. Yeah.
It's like, all right, everybody grab a piece of paper.
That's right.
Write something down for someone else to do. Magic. You've just written a spell.
You've just cast a spell. That's right. That's right. All right, so we got a couple of one-up boxes.
Yeah.
The first one I opened is, I don't know who this is from because it's just an Amazon package, but it is a stack of cool space bookmarks. So thank you very much. Every one of them has a different... Space marks. There's lots of whales in space for some reason. I don't know why, but they're cool. So thank you. I presume this is perhaps because they know that I'm going to be doing...
I bet it's from Anne.
It could be from Anne.
We're just going to...
We're going to wager. Make a wager?
Yeah.
It could be because people have heard that I will be doing...
a book report with an actual book.
Yes. Why can't I think of the name of the book?
It's about all the
Hamlet's Mill.
Myths and
Hamlet's Mill, in which I had to order the physical book, so now I have a stack of like 100 space bookmarks.
I keep forgetting the name of that book too. All right, and the other package we got is from a good friend of the band and the show and the family from way back.
Shall I read this card?
Yes.
Russ and Kyle, I hope this gift finds a place of honor in the 10 by 10 by 10 Tangent Cube of Science. This product was made by veteran Jeremy Jonas, Chief Rock Officer of Rock the USA. Snakeforce can check out his products at rocktheusa.com. Congratulations on the success of your show. Y'all rock in so many ways. Todd, a.k.a. Network Man. Thanks, Todd. I'll put that Rock the USA in the show notes.
Oh, my God.
Dude.
Oh, my God.
No wonder the box was so freaking heavy.
Yeah. Wow, it's
an impossible block.
Piece of stone. Get that off the bottom. It's this. Oh my God, that's awesome.
It is a slab of stone with the Brothers of the Serpent logo.
I wonder if this is a geopolymer
engraved into it. Oh yeah, is it a geopolymer? Yeah, it looks like. Look at the back. Well, that could be cut.
It could be cut.
That is really cool.
My God, it's beautiful.
How much do you think it weighs?
Engraved with the show logo.
You're gonna need some slaves to get it up on top of the.
I need to build a giant ramp to get it up there where it's gonna go.
Well, let's get the trumpets down. Maybe we can sing it to the top of the to the cube.
That's awesome, man.
That is
Thank
amazing.
you so much, Todd.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Fantastic. And, you know, he demanded that Laura be in here taking pictures of us opening it, and we were like, no. You can take pictures of us after it's open.
That's right.
So during the break, we'll have a picture of us in here with it.
Yeah.
Wow, dude. I knew it was a rock. I mean, the box said Rock the USA, and it was really heavy.
Okay, I was thinking it was like a piece of metal because it was so freaking heavy.
I'm going to set it up here.
I didn't know it was called Rock the USA. That's
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Emails.
I will put a picture of that in the show notes as well, because that's really cool. With the space marks. Okay. Let's tackle some emails. Good grief. Okay, so this is a comment that came in on the website from Muskie Elon. And I think this is referencing an email that I read. Was it on the last episode? The person.
How come we're not going to the moon first? Muskie Elon. Why Mars?
Yeah, we have questions for you later, Musk. Yeah, so I think this is about the person who was saying that they heard. We read the email maybe on the last show that they heard their voice being called. You remember that?
That might have been the cat.
No, I read an email where the person was telling a story.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Kyle's confused.
I was taking a drink of my coffee. I was confused.
Yeah, I read an email where a person was saying that they told a story about hearing their
That's right.
their name, all three of them, like their full name, very clearly called in their ear.
That's right.
Yeah, and it might have been somebody who heard, I don't know. Anyways, this is a response to that. This person says, the calling of the letter writer's name at night is a well-known tactic of Sasquatch to lure children outside. It is well-known First Nations lore. Bigfoot, as we call them, are extremely intelligent ambush predators. They are known for luring children out and into the forest for food. They do the same to dogs. They can mimic human voices in almost any animal, but not very well. They will watch humans if they are in the area. They are hunting and are well known for abducting children, and they can also whistle. For your information, bros, they are very active in East Texas. If you want a reality check, look up the Torn Up Camp vid on YouTube. 2 people are still missing from that encounter, and there is 1 survivor. For real facts and no BS, look up William Jevning and the Jevning Research Group. It will blow your mind. You may not have seen or heard a Bigfoot, but if you live in a rural area, they have seen you.
What's your foot size, buddy? How do you know all this?
Yes, it is stated as fact.
I mean, like, this guy's like, I am Bigfoot. I'm going to write in.
Right.
Tell you guys about what we do, but
Calls
pretend
himself,
like it's not me.
Calls himself Muskie Elon. We all know that old Bigfoot's got a stench. Okay. Okay, let's try this one. He says, this is from DJ? Yeah. He says, hello, serpents. I suppose. Oh, it's called Lost Skeleton of Cadavra. He says, hello, serpents. I suppose I should start with the customary greeting of how I came upon your fine pod. My Snakes, Rogan, Carlson triangle actually starts with you. I stumbled upon you at episode 34 and have been a loyal listener ever since and been a Patreon dude for the last year or 2. Man, thank you for the support. Buddy. So this is a Snakes, Rogan, Carlson. Like, he starts with us. And then we're like, he keeps saying, like, why do people say Rogan? So he goes to listen to Rogan, and that's how he listens to Randall. That's interesting. I'm going to tell Randall this.
Yeah, bro.
Make sure we
sent you 1 fan.
Yeah, and Rogan. You can thank us later, Rogan. Says, I really enjoy the mid-'80s local access vibe since I grew up watching a lot of that. I don't often correspond with people that I listen to or watch because it has always felt weird to me. I know you, in a sense, and you have no idea who I am. So that seems odd, but these last couple of episodes with the Book of the Damned reminded me of the movie The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra. It is a parody of B movies from the 50s, and it's my favorite comedy. It is brilliantly done, and the way Fort speaks reminds me of this movie. You may know of this. If not, it is definitely worth a watch. That's all I got for now. You guys rock. Snacks from DJ.
Thanks, DJ.
So maybe we'll check that out. The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra.
I could use a good comedy.
Good old B movie from the 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been watching What We Do in the Shadows, which is this stupid comedy show. It's about vampires. But anyway, moving on. It's a great show, though. It's hilarious.
Okay.
It's just really stupid. But yeah, comedy's good every now and again.
All right. This is from Wes. It's called Thanks. And let's see. So yeah, he starts this by revealing an Easter egg that is scattered throughout the show. So I'm not going to talk about that. Good catch, Wes. But he says, I found you guys through Randall somehow back in the Shiny Guys days, just like everyone, and I was re-listening to episode 200 and wanted to remind you that for some reason, you do help some of us through very dark times. Your love and honesty and shared recognition that we're all morons, watcher excluded, helps all of our hearts and minds. Thank you so much, guys. Love to Laura and the kids, too. You guys couldn't do it without them. Cuss and Ryle, right?
That's right.
Your name is Cuss.
Good thing we caught that Easter egg before you revealed it.
That's right.
That is why we are the professionals here, and you are lovable yet rank amateurs who email the show. But thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Wes. We really appreciate it. Okay. Oh, look. This is from Roddy the Mammal. It's called The Book of the Gosh Darn It. Dear Ophidian siblings, so pleased you are doing a book report of Fort's The Book of the Damned. I myself have tried to delve into its hallowed pages, but found Fort's prose style to be a somewhat laborious and labyrinthian tangle of befuddlement and confusion. Now, with not one but two enlightened and erudite epigones to parse his pleonastically periphrastic prose, I can finally enjoy the mystically metaphysical musing of the father of Fortiana with ease, with comfort, and with insightful serpentine synthesis and scholarship. And now, as my
Nice alliteration.
And now, as my dog-eared copy of Roget's Thesaurus has fallen behind the couch, I have chose to end this missive rather than sputter on and slip into the mere mundane phraseology we mammals seem prone to do so and stuff. Thank you in advance. Yours, Roddy the Mammal.
Lost is the thesaurus.
I had to look up like 4 or 5 of these words to make sure I could say them right. Pleonastically, periphrastic. Those are great words. All right. Thanks, Roddy. And yes, it's great doing the Book of the Damned. And I agree. It's
I just have this image in my head of Roddy sitting there writing, claiming to be a mammal. He's like probably wearing a fursuit.
Right. Forked tongue comes out every once in a while.
Shh, shh, shh.
The Book of the Gosh Darn It. That's the best email title I've seen in a while. Okay, so I've got 3. Let's see, is it 3 more? 1, 2, maybe it's just 2 more. 2 more emails here, and these are both addressing another email that we read last time from the person who was saying that they were struggling spiritually after listening to much of the show and contemplating the stuff that we talk about. So this first one is from Daniel, and he says, this is from a Fringe fanatic. He says, Dear Russ and Kyle, greetings from a fellow podcaster on the Fringe Radio Network. I must say your show is by far one of my favorites. I particularly enjoyed your breakdown of Velikovsky and the UFO series with Marty. I've been listening for several years, and I blame you for my ever-expanding collection of unread books. The latest being The Book of the Damned. You might say Charles Fort is the ultimate anti-skirp. I am Christian, but was, at one time, more agnostic. In the world of Christendom, we have our skirptards, always ready with a scripture, but rarely with any context or acknowledgement that the writers of the Bible often use figurative and symbolic language. You read an email on your last episode from a listener who was concerned about their faith being eroded listening to the show. To me, the opposite is true. It only deepens my appreciation of God's creation. Science and faith are not mutually exclusive viewpoints. That is a false dichotomy. But it may be that science as a tool is limited to observations of the physical world and what we can perceive with our 5 senses. When we're dealing with the spiritual, we're employing a mystical understanding, a sense of knowing that can't be explained with science. Your show often deals with subjects that cross this boundary, and so by its very nature appears shadowy and mysterious. It's hard to pin down. Call it the observer effect. It seems to me that Fort had a quantum understanding before it was the dominant view. We try in earnest to classify and label the phenomena we observe because of our current incarnation, our locality on a plane of unlimited potential. God gave us our senses because they are suited for our current environment. Anyways, it's safe to say we may never know the full truth until we're dead, and then the physical world will seem just as puzzling from our new viewpoint. Keep up the fantastic job, from Daniel. And he has a postscript here, a quote, a scripture. And these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name shall they cast out devils. They shall speak with new tongues. They shall take up serpents. And if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. Mark chapter 16, verse 17 through 18.
They shall take up serpents.
They shall take up serpents. Thanks, Daniel. And yeah, fellow podcaster on the Fringe Radio Network. That's cool. All right, one more. This one is from Carl. And Carl is also a mod, an admin in the Discord. So he calls this is titled In Search of a Sense of Mystery. Snake Bros, longtime listener, first-time emailer. Episode 230 began with a touching message from a fellow snake asking, how does one put a faith back together when every pantheon has been torn apart or made mute? Such a tough question. So much empathy for this person. I can only imagine how many people listening have gone through something similar. From my own experience, I just wanted to say that even if they feel a sense of loss, it is only temporary. More so, there are a lot of people right there with this person, walking the same journey, shoulder to shoulder. While researching some of those torn-apart pantheons, I came across a term I find particularly meaningful. Originally, the Greek word gnosis described intrapersonal knowledge, as if a person knows something to be true in their bones. In the 13th century, the term was later adopted by a breakaway sect of Christians called the Cathars. I think that's how you say that. While the Cathars were devoted followers of Christ, their belief system was, well, let's just say, radically different than Roman Catholicism. To the Cathars, gnosis was used to explain an intrapersonal knowledge of God without external agency. The Cathars insisted they needed no church to know God's presence and welcomed women as priests. Once it was known to the Longheads in Rome that the Christian God could be experienced outside the confined walls of the Catholic Church, gnosis became a dangerous idea. After the medieval Inquisition, we sadly hear very little about the rituals and traditions of the Cathars. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition, indeed. If the Cathars were still around, I like to think that they would suggest the same thing as Kyle and Russ. We should all go out in search of new experiences that fill us with a sense of mystery. All this talk of ancient lost pantheons and difficult journeys has me in the mood to hear my favorite Tolkien poem, if you will, The Riddle of Strider from Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. Spiritually wandering the ether, Carl. Snakes!
Yeah, that is a great poem.
It is.
That's cool.
You think he's just poking his wounds?
I don't know. It was like the first time I read it, I had a different thought, but I was like, yeah, he starts out by like, yeah, a lot of people are going through that. And then he just starts talking about how the Christians destroyed somebody's faith. So I don't know.
Yeah. But thanks for the help, buddy.
I didn't get that the second time through for some reason. But my mind was wandering too, because I'm like, I'm thinking of, it's like this, because I feel like I've gone through the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't know, this principle of completion, like completing something that I got from the Cheng Shin classes, Peter Ralston.
Yeah.
The first steps to completing something is to take away all the stuff that it isn't.
Yeah.
So it's like, to me, the faith in a creator or, God was like crowded by all of this fancy tales and stuff that
Yeah.
put an image to the character and deeds and desires and actions, and you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah.
And it's like, okay, that is all symbolic storytelling. Mm-hmm. So you remove that.
That was possibly taken too literally or something, maybe.
Well,
Yeah.
definitely by me as a child.
Yeah, right. You have to get rid of that. Yeah.
So yeah, it's like and so his point about like it doesn't last forever, you know, it's not always going to be that way. Or was that the previous writer? I can't remember. Is a good point, because it's like, okay, yeah, I'm no longer seeing the imagery and I'm no longer connecting all of the actions and the desires and the words with the idea of God. Mm-hmm. But that's actually doing more to complete the aspect or the idea of God than to take away from it.
Yeah.
Because you're taking away things that are symbolic writing and stuff by people.
Yes. Yeah.
So it forces you to go to a more personal route, like just through your own mind, through your own being.
Yes.
Not through exterior, physical things like books and texts and stuff.
Yeah, and that's what Carl was saying about the Gnosis.
The Gnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it like requires no external
So that's why I was like
agency.
the second time I was listening to it, I was like, okay, I've got a different.
He's not just stabbing his wounds.
No, I don't think so.
Well, they're both from Daniel and Carl. I think they're both great emails, and we had more. I just I can't read them all on the show, but just to say, man, and I should have looked up your name, but you know who you are. You wrote in about having a spiritual break from listening to the show. Lots of people were moved by your email, and I think Carl's right that lots of people are right there with you in this journey, including us. This studying this stuff and reading about it and then discussing it between ourselves has drastically changed all kinds of stuff about how we view the world and the way our spirituality affects us and the way we view it. And I think Kyle went through this much more than I did. I would say that I'm not nearly as spiritual a person as Kyle is. So I think it was much stronger for him. Like, right?
I don't know how strong it was for you, but it definitely was.
I was like, wow, this is cool. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was at the same time, I'm like, this is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
There was this other part of me that was like, wow, what do I do with this now?
Yeah.
Right. But I would highly recommend digging into David Matheson's work.
Yeah. David has gone through this same...
Because he went through the same thing, but I like his perspective on the myths.
Yeah.
And it's almost given me more respect for the myths and the symbols in all of the various stories that have been passed down, not just in the canon that is the Bible, but all these other sources. And you can see the similarities, and that's just really cool. And the thing that really gets me about it is it does drive some type of spiritual enlightenment. Nevertheless, I just think that the Orthodox Christian view, in my opinion, doesn't work for me now that I've looked into these other sources and seen all the similarities and what seems to be a repeating story, right, throughout time.
Yeah.
This same story being told over and over again throughout time. So I don't take any of it literally, but it's like the symbols, what they mean and what they stand for are beautiful, and they can apply to my life in so many different ways, like little windows or little sections of my life, or my life as a whole, or like a large portion of my life through a certain period of time.
Yeah.
It's like they're sort of metaphors to all these different things that we go through as humans. Another one that I've really gotten into in the past is the tarot.
Yes.
Right? The tarot is another story, the path of the fool. That's
one we're all on.
has,
sure.
yeah, we're all on the path of the fool. So it's the 22
Some of us more than others.
the 22 major arcana of the tarot tell a beautiful story.
Yeah.
And that story can be related to, and I'll just myself, I can't say that it works for everybody, but the whole story of the path of the fool can relate to like a single period of my life or the entire lifetime.
Yes.
Or like one card.
It is scale invariant.
Yes. Or like one specific card could be something that happens to me in a day.
Yeah.
Or it could be a period that's happening to me over the course of years. It's really cool. And I think that there's some kind of, this is why we call it a technology. It seems like there was a period of time at some great,
almost unbelievable, ancient, out of the mists of prehistory.
Yeah. That they were creating these stories.
Yeah.
And these symbols and like they apply to astronomy and the motions and just like the seasons and all of these things that we experience in the real world around us that a lot of times we just don't even pay attention to, but they're alluding to these things all the time, but they also apply to ourselves and our spiritual selves. It's just really cool. It's like this is some kind of technology that was made to like wake us up at certain periods in our lives or something.
Yeah.
So that is awesome. And the fact that those things exist is amazing to me, and they've been preserved, and in the myriad ways that they have been preserved, and what they've been preserved in is like another level of their secrecy or of their esoteric nature, that they're preserved in like a deck of playing cards.
Right.
It's like they reach to all facets of humanity, no matter,
Yeah. And the fact that they use like a kind of chance, to do stuff with, just like, and then when you think about that, and then some of the weird, like, physics stuff that we know about how the universe also seems to use chance to do things.
Yep.
That it's like, how did they even know that this system,
You're talking about chance as opposed like randomness?
as in random, yeah,
Okay, not
probabilities.
chance as in homo.
No, yeah, not chance.
Okay.
But chance.
Okay. Because some of them do use chance.
Yes, sometimes you do need to put on a robe and chant. But yeah, so I guess I should say is random, random numbers, that the way that you can use tarot to sort of
Yeah.
tell the story that you're looking for is like you shuffle the cards and you're
Yep.
basically relying on fundamental systems of the universe to pull the right ones out. It's
Yeah.
just really interesting.
Yeah. It is very interesting.
Yeah.
And so, Snake Mom, coming from, she's Catholic and she's very devoted to her faith and the Catholic Church. We've talked about this kind of stuff. Like, how can all of these stories be represented thousands of years before, Christian times? And so in her view, this is God, right? Like this is how, like, it's his influence that's creating this.
Yeah.
This is why these things.
She doesn't care how
are
far
here.
back it goes. It's
Right.
God telling the story. Yeah.
Essentially, God influencing people,
Yes.
right? To have this story, preserve this story throughout time.
Yeah.
Okay, so if that's any help to you, there you go. I mean, that's the way she looks at it.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily look at it that way,
That's right.
but it's. I can't say she's wrong. I have no
Right.
idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Another way, maybe, I've thought about this some, and it's like there's a kind of homesickness that happens when you kind of go down this journey or dive into these rabbit holes or whatever. And the homesickness it's a kind of homesickness for how you previously looked at the world.
like I kind of miss the Anunnaki now.
Yeah. Where's the ancient aliens? I miss those. So
No, but
it's
I get you.
you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That like, maybe like an analogy would be, if you grow up in a secluded, beautiful mountain valley, and you're basically you've grown up there, you spent your whole life there, and then you just like the hero of all the stories, you set out on your journey, and you leave that beautiful, secluded, protected mountain valley, and you cross that first mountain pass, and you look out on this enormously wide world, and you're both like in awe of what you're seeing and all of the possibilities to discover, but you also feel like pangs in your heart of a loss, like you already miss where you came from.
Yeah, and as the hero encounters new cultures and different ways of doing things, it's like destroying the beliefs of his childhood.
That's
being
right.
in this secluded
exactly.
culture of people that all have done the same things for generations.
Yeah.
So you see that, in many stories like that. So but then it's in a way it's like those roots go on to be the fabric that sort of holds the hero together.
Yeah.
Through the tough times.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. That's right. And no matter where the hero goes, he'll always remember his home.
Yeah.
And his perspective will change sometimes as he's aware of it, and sometimes not.
Yeah.
But he's got these roots, like you were saying. But yes, there's always going to be a sort of like, life used to be simple. And kind of, I had it figured out. But
this is all in the path of the fool, too.
that's right. The journey is worth it.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So again, I don't know if any of that helps spiritually.
So
but
it's a cycle.
we've all been thinking about your email, Jonathan.
Yeah, it's
I think
true.
Jonathan is his name. I looked it up. So yeah, thank you once again to all the people who have written in, including Jonathan, and spawning these fantastic discussions of this kind of stuff.
Yeah. One more thing I'll say is that the path of the fool is a cycle. So the first card is the fool arriving into the world, and he's got his little, traveling, he's got his little stick with the bag on the end of it, whatever you call that thing. Rucksack or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like hung over his shoulder, and he's just strolling into the world and looking up at the sky and just like, wow, it's like this amazing world, and he's about to walk off a cliff. He's not even looking down.
Yeah.
He's a baby, he's an infant, he's, just totally naive. So then it goes on through all of these different cards, and then you get to the final card, and then it starts over, and once again, like the fool re-enters the world.
Yeah.
So it's this whole cyclical thing that you can, like you were saying, scale invariant. You could say that type of cycle happens within one aspect or just period of a day where you might learn something new and have this sort of paradigm shift.
Yeah.
Or you could stretch it out over an entire lifetime.
Yep. Or it could be over the process of a couple of years.
Yeah.
Or it could be like you get a new job and that sort of thing happens. And yeah.
So it's kind of cool. Like you recognize right now you're in this sort of limbo.
A liminal state.
Liminal
which is where
state.
really interesting things can happen.
And you eventually figure it all out, and then you're like, okay, now I got it all
this
figured
down.
out.
It's the freaking aliens.
And then it happens again.
Yeah.
And then you're once again the fool entering the world totally naive.
Yeah,
and
you're like,
just
wow, maybe it was demons. I don't know.
So yeah, it's worth it.
It is worth it.
All right.
Thank you guys so much. brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com if you want to email the show. I do read them all. Can't read them all on the show, but
We cannot seem to do a 30-minute first segment.
I know.
So.
I had it. Bam. Down,
I know.
but we had
My
10
fault.
10 more minutes of things to say. All right. We're going to take
be
a
right
break.
back.
Thank you guys.
Brothers of the Serpent podcast, a test of faith for so many, including myself. But the journey goes on, folks, and the cycles continue. Right. So we begin again for part 3 of Charles Fort's The Book of the Gosh Darn It. It's just what I'm going to call it forever.
From now on, that's right. It is the Book of the Gosh Darn It. And we got our...
cheers, old boy.
Cheers. We got our book report beers.
We have a giant slab of granite.
Yes.
It might be, I think it might be quartzite.
Could be.
It's very fine. It looks
Fine
like
grained.
It looks like light gray sand that has been turned to stone.
Yeah.
But it's not sandstone, for sure.
No.
It's like hard as a rock.
Okay, so I think the last thing we were tackling in the Book of the Gosh Darn It was, remember he was talking about gelatinous substances said to have fallen alongside meteorites.
Yeah.
And so then he was like, is there like a layer of gelatinous stuff that meteorites penetrate when they fall to the ground?
That's right. A sensible question.
It is. So he says that in Wilna, Lithuania, April 4th, 1846, in a rainstorm fell nut-sized masses of a substance that is described as both resinous and gelatinous. It was odorless until burned. Then it spread a very pronounced Swedish odor. That would be sweet-ish. Not Sweden, but
Okay.
sweet-ish.
Not a Swedish.
That's right. It is described as like gelatin, but much firmer. But having been in water 24 hours, it swelled out and looked altogether gelatinous, and it was grayish. We are told that in 1841 and 1846, a similar substance had fallen in Asia Minor.
So I wonder if this is like, if it's...
Got to be careful with those beers when I'm trying to read.
Well, anyway, I don't know what it is. Go.
But did you have a question?
No, I was just thinking about the pieces of meteorites or meteors could actually be comet fragments, which could actually have
Yeah, for sure.
organic materials in there
Yep.
that, you know, like proteins and stuff that
Yeah, I agree. And then
turn into gel when they're coming in, like they...
Yeah, there might be some weird chemical thing that happens as they come into the atmosphere, right? That maybe they don't start out as gel when they're out in space, but when they're coming down, there's heat and whatever. I don't know. It's a strange thing, but yeah, like we've been, on Cosmography with Randall, we've been discussing the fires and what seems to be the influx of just superheated gases, and sandy material and other stuff. So he says, in Notes and Queries, it is said that early August in 1894, thousands of jellyfish, about the size of a shilling, had fallen at Bath in England. Bath. Spelled B-A-T-H.
Of course.
Is that how you say it? Or do you think it might be like Biddly Twinkle or something? It's spelled B-A-T-H, okay. So hopefully it's Bath. I think it is not acceptable that they were jellyfish, but it does look as if this time frog spawn did fall from the sky and may have been translated by a whirlwind because at the same time, small frogs fell at Wigan in England. That's W-I-G-A-N. So hopefully it's Wigan or Wigan. In June 24th of 1911, at Eton and Bucks in England, the ground was found covered with masses of jelly the size of peas after a heavy rainfall. We are not told of nostoc this time. It is said that the object contained numerous eggs of, quote, some species of Chironomus, from which larvae soon emerged. Let me look that up. Chironomus? What is Chironomus? A genus of non-biting midges, a bloodworm family.
Okay. I'm looking up.
You're looking up something else?
Yeah.
So again, if you guys remember, nostoc would have been the microorganism that forms on the ground after rains, growing in water and damp places, forms a gelatinous mass. So this would be the thing where they're saying, it didn't rain from the sky. It was already there. Okay. London Times, April 24th, 1871. That upon the 22nd of April, 1871, a storm of glutinous drops, neither jellyfish nor masses of frog spawn, but something of a, and then I guess there's a line missing in the original text here. Okay, so something of a unknown railroad station at Bath. Many soon developed into a worm-like chrysalis, about an inch in length. The account of this occurrence in the Zoologist is more like the Eton datum of minute forms said to have been infusoria, not forms about an inch in length. So again, we're looking at worm-like organisms falling from the sky, but they start out as like jelly-like substances, and then worms come out of them. So I don't know what's happening here. That the phenomenon has been investigated by the Reverend L. Jennings of Bath. His description is of minute worms in filmy envelopes. He tries
eggs.
Eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like maybe they were eggs.
Yes.
So it's like gelatinous stuff.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. He's there.
I wasn't listening because I was reading. Sorry.
Right. So he's saying that they were described at first as glutinous drops that were neither jellyfish nor masses of frog spawn, so they're looking for eggs.
Gotcha.
And then it says, and so the description. Okay, so what he's getting this from is the London Times, but there's a line missing in the original text. So the description is strange. They were a storm of glutinous drops that were neither jellyfish nor masses of frog spawn, but something of a, and then there's text missing. Okay. But many soon developed into a worm-like. Is that how you say that? Chrysalis? Chrysalis? I don't remember. I'm probably saying it wrong. About an inch in length. Yeah, so worms came out of it eventually. So I think eggs is probably right. It's just they weren't recognizable as such at first. So the phenomenon was investigated. This description was of minute worms in filmy envelopes. The Reverend tries to account for their segregation. The mystery of it is, what could have brought so many of them together? Many other falls we shall have record of, and in most of them, segregation is the great mystery. A whirlwind seems anything but a segregative force. Segregation of things that have fallen from the sky has been avoided as most deep-dyed of the damned. Right, so segregation meaning, like, why does it sort them into only frogs?
Yep.
Mr. Jennings conceives of a large pool in which were many of these spherical masses, of the pool drying up and concentrating all in a small area, and then of a whirlwind scooping up all together. But several days later, more of these objects fall in the same place. That such marksmanship is not attributable to whirlwinds seems to me to be what we think we mean by common sense. It may not...
But what marksmanship could be attributed to what? I mean, what could you attribute the marksmanship to? You know what I'm saying? He keeps saying this, like you can't attribute the marksmanship to this whirlwind.
Yeah.
Well, what can you attribute it to?
Spaceships.
Okay.
I'm serious.
That's it. That's basically it. Intelligence.
Yeah, that something is dropping this stuff on purpose.
Okay. Let me do a quick aside here.
Okay.
Because this is where my mind was going with the coagulated stuffs. Coagulation is defined as the transformation of proteins from a liquid state to a solid form. Once proteins are coagulated, they cannot be returned to their liquid state. Coagulation often begins around 38 degrees Celsius or 100 Fahrenheit, and the process is complete between 71 degrees Celsius and 82 degrees Celsius or 160 to 180 Fahrenheit. Within the baking process, this is all about baking and cooking. Within the baking process, the natural structures of the ingredients are altered irreversibly by a series of physical, chemical, and biochemical interactions. The three main types of protein that cause coagulation in the bake shop are outlined below. And so the first one is eggs, and the egg whites is albumin. Right. So we learned about this in the winery because wines were fined for thousands of years with egg whites. Because you put the egg white in there and it coagulates with the proteins in the wine, and they get so big that they drop out of solution.
Right, which is why they call it find. Yeah.
So that's what it made me think of, is that like, well, we deal with this.
So there's an irreversible chemical change that takes place at some point between
heating.
Weird gaseous stuff and then heating in the atmosphere, and it drops as a jelly.
That's why I was thinking, it's like, okay, so if this cometary fragments, I'm trying to think of a natural process that could take care of course, the marksmanship.
Lacking the marksmanship.
But just the idea of a coagulated stuff falling from the sky, that could it be proteins in cometary fragments?
Yeah.
Like large amounts of proteins, which suggests that they were some kind of like soup for life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like some kind of egg, like the fish spawn.
Yeah.
If you were, to something really small, the fish spawn would be like this gigantic mass of coagulant proteins.
Yeah. Yep.
So if there are giant space whales out there that are just like,
Or that some comets are frozen pieces of an ancient ocean.
Yeah, dude.
I
love this.
That's a great idea. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, and then it like, who knows what's frozen in there if it's actually an ancient ocean that had biological.
And if it was from Tiamat, which is this gigantic planet,
ocean planet,
that could have held massive life forms. That could have laid huge gelatinous
exactly
masses of
millions of eggs that turn into tiny worms that then go to kill everybody.
Yeah.
It's going to turn into Lovecraft no
Space
matter what
worms.
you do. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, moving on. That was what I was.
Chrysales, maybe that's how you say this. I'm still thinking about it. Okay, so again, he talks about the marksmanship, and he says, so it may not look like common sense to say that these things had been stationary over the town of Bath for several days. But then he reminds us of the black rains of Slains and the four red rains of Siena, which again were the ones where he was pointing out marksmanship. An interesting sidelight on the mechanics of orthodoxy is that Mr. Jennings dutifully records the second fall, but ignores it in his explanation, which is an interesting thing, right? There's two falls. Jennings, who's doing he's writing up reports and he's doing an explanation. He records the second fall, but doesn't talk about it at all in his explanation of what's happening. R.P. Gregg, one of the most notable of catalogers of meteoritic phenomena, records falls of viscid substance in the years 1652, 1686, 1718, 1796, 1811, 1819, and 1844. He gives earlier dates, but I practice exclusions myself. In the report of the British Association, 1860, Gregg records a meteor that seemed to pass near the ground between Barsdorf and Freiburg in Germany. The next day, a jelly-like mass was found in the snow, and it is unseasonable at the time for either spawn or nostoc. Gregg's comment in this instance is curious if true. But he records without modification the fall of a meteorite at Gotha in Germany, September 6 in 1835, quote, leaving a jelly-like mass on the ground, unquote. We are told that this substance fell only 3 feet away from an observer. In the report of the British Association, 1855, according to a letter from Gregg to Professor Baden-Powell at night, October 8th, 1844, near Koblenz, a German who was known to Gregg, and another person saw a luminous body fall close to them. They returned next morning and found a gelatinous mass of grayish color.
It waited till the next morning?
Yeah, I know.
Come on.
That's strange.
I guess it was miles away, maybe.
Some of this, again, reminds me of like weird falls from UFOs.
Yeah. We can't rule that out. But
yeah.
I'm always trying to think about a natural explanation.
UFOs could have a natural explanation too.
Well, I mean, in the common use of the word,
right.
Meaning not the natural intelligent beings.
Okay, yeah. According to Chladni's account in the Annals of Philosophy, a viscous mass fell with a luminous meteorite between Siena and Rome in May of 1652. Viscous matter found after the fall of a fireball in Lusatia, March 1796. A fall of a gelatinous substance after the explosion of a meteorite near Heidelberg, July 1811. In the Edinburgh Philosophical Journal, the substance that fell at Lusatia is said to have been of the, quote, color and odor of dried brown varnish, unquote. In the American Journal of Science, it is said that gelatinous matter fell with a globe of fire upon the island of Lethe in India in 1718. In the American Journal of Science, in many observations upon the meteors of November 1833 are reports of falls of gelatinous substance that, according to newspaper reports, lumps of jelly were found on the ground at Rahway, New Jersey. The substance was whitish or resembled the coagulated white of an egg.
Yeah. Albumin.
So Mr. H. Garland of Nelson County in Virginia had found a jelly-like substance of about the circumference of a 25-cent piece. And according to a communication from A.C. Twining to Professor Olmsted, a woman at West Point in New York had seen a mass the size of a teacup, and it looked like boiled starch. So yeah, a lot of this sounds like what you were talking about, like the egg white stuff, it's coagulation or some kind of protein change. According to a newspaper of Newark in New Jersey, a mass of gelatinous substance like soft soap had been found.
So real quick, before you go on, when we think of a fragment of a celestial body falling to Earth, we imagine that it burns up in the atmosphere and it reaches extreme levels of heat.
Yeah.
Explodes. But that's because relative to the Earth's motion, it's moving extremely fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so my question is...
They don't have to be.
Yeah, if they were moving somehow at a speed that's relatively close to the same speed and same direction of Earth,
Yeah.
then they just slowly fall into the atmosphere. It's possible that
if there's
that
a slow convergence rather than
Because, okay, so that guy Baumeister or whatever who went up into the stratosphere in a balloon.
Baumgarten? Baumgarten? I don't know.
Yes,
Baumgarten?
not Baumeister.
Baumeister.
Yeah.
The Fallmeister.
He didn't burn up,
Yeah.
right? But he went way up there and fell in.
Yeah, because he had terminal velocity.
Right.
Rather than impact velocity or...
So the space shuttle,
multiple ways that we can intersect stuff in space.
but the space shuttle has these tiles that that on it to
because it has orbital velocity, which is a lot faster. So the way it slows down is it has to break its orbital velocity by running into the atmosphere, and
instead of using jets to slow itself down.
Yeah.
But
Orbital
if
velocity
it
is
had the
fast.
fuel, could it just turn around and
Absolutely.
just burn the jets until it was sitting still above
And
the
then-
Earth like
and
a
then fall-
balloon,
and then fall,
and
yeah.
then fall nice and easy and not burn
100%.
up?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be a powered entry,
Powered entry.
right? Every kind of space flight we've done so far, that the human race has done so far that we know of, have been gravity re-entries where you have to waste your orbital velocity by running into the atmosphere.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So if something is coming in towards Earth and there's a very gentle convergence of orbits,
Yeah.
then
It's
yes,
almost on the same orbital path as the Earth, and they
Yes.
just slowly get closer and closer.
right, and
to
it would
each other.
basically just kind of get pulled in and start to fall by gravity, and it would have terminal velocity.
So it would
or
get,
maybe
it
a
might
little
get
faster.
hot,
Yeah,
but
might be
it
a little
wouldn't
faster.
necessarily boil the interior of the object.
Right, because its terminal velocity can be relatively high in the very high atmosphere where there's not a lot of
Not a
atmosphere
lot
to
of
slow it down.
atmosphere,
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's
So it's
that's a great
possible that
point.
we could run into pieces of comets that are just going the proper speed where they would.
Yeah,
And
if
then
all
you
the
could
orbits-
imagine that they're like a mass of these objects, and one of them falls first, and then the other one falls a little bit later the
Mm-hmm.
next day.
Yep.
But then they shouldn't land on the same place.
Yeah.
That's strange.
It is.
All right.
The marksmanship is still weird.
Okay, dang it. I'll keep working on that.
Okay. Where was I at?
Baumgarten. I don't know.
According to a newspaper of Newark, New Jersey, a massive gelatinous substance like soft soap had been found. Quote, it possessed little elasticity, and on the application of heat, it evaporated as readily as water, unquote. It seems incredible that a scientist would have such hardihood or infidelity as to accept that these things had fallen from the sky. Nevertheless, Professor Olmsted, who collected these lost souls, says, quote, the fact that the supposed deposits were so uniformly described as gelatinous substance forms a presumption in favor of the supposition that they had the origin ascribed to them, unquote. Wow, what an interesting way to say it. In contemporaneous scientific publications, considerable attention was given to Professor Olmsted's series of papers upon this subject of the November meteors. You will not find one mention of the part that treats of gelatinous matter. Okay, so alongside of a lot of this, there was that fall of a lot of meteors. And well, I guess what he's saying is there's plenty of scientific publications where they were paying a lot of attention to his descriptions of that particular meteor fall, but all of them ignore the gelatinous stuff that fell alongside.
Thank you for making that clear.
It wasn't clear to me when I first read it. Okay. So, Chapter 5. I shall attempt not much of correlation of dates. A mathematic-minded positivist with his delusion that in an intermediate state twice 2 are 4, whereas if we accept continuity, we cannot accept that there are anywhere 2 things to start with, would search our data for periodicities. It is so obvious to me that the mathematic or the regular is the attribute of the universal that I have not much inclination to look for it in the local. So are you getting what I think what he's saying there is looking for cycles in this is probably not going to work. What we're looking at is too local rather than universal. In other words, what he's saying is because we don't have
it's an anomaly.
Because we don't have, like you were saying last episode, a scientist in every place on Earth observing every anomalous fall.
Right.
Our data is thus local rather than universal. So looking for periodicities is a, probably not going to work. Still, in this solar system as a whole, there is considerable approximation to regularity, or the mathematic is so nearly localized that eclipses, for instance, can, with rather high approximation, be foretold. Though I do have notes that would deflate a little the astronomer's vainglory in this respect, or would if that were possible. An astronomer is poorly paid, uncheered by crowds, considerably isolated. He lives upon his own inflations. Deflate a bear and it couldn't hibernate. This solar system is like every other phenomenon that can be regarded as a whole, or the affairs of a ward are interfered with by the affairs of the city of which it is a part. City by county, county by state, state by nation, nation by other nations, all nations by climatic conditions by solar circumstances, sun by general planetary circumstances, solar system as a whole by other solar systems. So the hopelessness of finding the phenomena of entirety in the ward of a city. But positivists are those who try to find the unrelated in the ward of a city. In our acceptance, this is the spirit of cosmic religion. Objectively, the state is not realizable in the ward of a city, but if a positivist could bring himself to absolute belief that he had found it, that would be a subjective realization of that which is unrealizable objectively. Of course, we do not draw a positive line between the objective and the subjective, or that all phenomena called things or persons are subjective within one all-inclusive nexus, and that thoughts within those that are commonly called persons are subjective. It is rather as if intermediateness strove for regularity in this solar system and failed, then generated the mentality of astronomers, and in that secondary expression strove for conviction that failure had been success. So I think what he's trying to say there, again, he's pointing out that every system that you could possibly look at, except for everything, is affected by other systems.
Yeah. And so the astronomers are trying to categorize everything into different systems, but and then their convictions are basically
right. And then I think what he's pointing out with the eclipse examples, he's like, because there is in the solar system a sort of quasi regularity that you can predict eclipses with some kind of success.
Yeah, but then 2,000 years later or 4,000 years later, we're looking back on the records of previous astronomers where they're like, yes, we saw an eclipse in this place at this time.
And we're like, that can't be right.
That didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Fort says, I have tabulated all the data of this book and a great deal besides. Card system and several proximities thus emphasized have been revelations to me. Nevertheless, it is only the method of theologians and scientists, worst of all, of statisticians. For instance, by the statistic method, I could prove that a black rain has fallen regularly every 7 months somewhere upon this earth. To do this, I'd have to include red rains and yellow rains, but conventionally, I'd pick out the black particles in red substances and in yellow substances and disregard the rest. Then, too, if here and there a black rain should be a week early or a month late, that would be acceleration or retardation. This is supposed to be legitimate in working out the periodicities of comets. If black rains or red or yellow rains with black particles in them should not appear at all near some dates, we have not read Darwin in vain. The records are not complete.
Yes.
As to other interfering black rains, they'd either be, gray or brown, or for them, we'd find other periodicities.
Yeah. Or they had too many red particles.
That's right. Still, I have had to notice the year 1819, for instance. I shall not note them all in this book, but I have records of 31 extraordinary events in 1883. And someone should write a book upon the phenomena of this one year. That is, if books should be written. 1849 is notable for extraordinary falls, so far apart that a local explanation seems inadequate. Not only the black rain of Ireland, May 1849, but a red rain in Sicily and a red rain in Wales. Also, it is said that upon April 18th or 20th, 1849, shepherds near Mount Ararat found a substance that was not indigenous upon areas measuring 8 to 10 miles in circumference, and presumably it had fallen there. We have already gone into the subject of science and its attempted positiveness, and its resistances in that it must have relations of service. It is very easy to see that most of the theoretic science of the 19th century was only a relation of reaction against theologic dogma, and has no more to do with truth than has a wave that bounds back from a shore. Or, if a shop girl or you or I should pull out a piece of chewing gum about a yard long, that would be quite as scientific a performance as was the stretching of this Earth's age several hundred millions of years. That's a strange way to say it. All things are not things, but only relations or expressions of relations. But all relations are striving to be the unrelated, or have surrendered to and subordinated to higher attempts. So there is a positivist aspect to this reaction that is itself only a relation.
Can you give a brief description of what he means by positivist again? 'Cause I know that that was part of the first episode or second. A
positivist as opposed to an intermediatist.
Okay, the intermediate.
A positivist is basically somebody who's like, I can isolate things and
all
define
the categories.
them. Yes, yeah.
And their specific relations to each other and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Whereas an intermediatist, as he calls himself, or he calls
the lines are very blurry.
Yes, right. That any given point, like the whole thing is a spectrum, and any given place you're at, it looks clear there, but it's a spectrum. So the farther away you go from that particular category, what you find out is that there's no clear line between it and something else. It just blurs into the other thing.
Yeah, it reminds me of the what's the guy who the 3 episodes we did on the
the hybrid stuff?
Yeah. We talked about that already. Just the blurriness of the species.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Yeah. That at the edges of habitats, species will blur into each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't that Eugene McCarthy?
That's right.
He adds the aptronym. Okay, so yes. So he says, though, so there is a positivist aspect to this reaction that is itself only a relation. And that is the attempt to assimilate all phenomena under the materialist explanation, or to formulate a final, all-inclusive system upon the materialist basis. If this attempt could be realized, that would be the attaining of realness. But this attempt can be made only by disregarding psychic phenomena, for instance. Or if science shall eventually give in to the psychic, it would be no more legitimate to explain the immaterial in terms of the material than to explain the material in terms of the immaterial. Our own acceptance is that material and immaterial are of a oneness, a merging, for instance, in a thought that is continuous with physical action. That oneness cannot be explained because the process of explaining is the interpreting of something in terms of something else. All explanation is assimilation of something in terms of something else that has been taken as a basis. But in continuity, there is nothing that is any more basic than anything else, unless we think that delusion built upon delusion is less real than its pseudo-foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some thoughts about this, but we should probably
Let's take a break. Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Snacks! And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, brothers of the Serpent podcast. Second hour, right? And this is the second hour. Second hour, and you are listening to bits of the tune Paralyzed. This is from the album
Prisoner. Not Prisoner. It's the
Kings and Thieves.
Kings
and Thieves album from $50 Dynasty. This one is published, so if you're interested, you can find this one in various places online.
It's an old one, as all of them are, but this one was actually recorded in the house up at the top.
Oh, yeah.
After it was freshly built. I think nobody lived there yet.
That's right, yeah. One of my favorite Kings and Thieves songs. I've listened to that one hundreds of times. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So I had some thoughts on the closing statements by Fort from the last segment, which it just sent me down this rabbit hole of these ideas that we've actually been kind of kicking around recently, but also some of the ideas that I got again from Cheng Shin, the school, the 1 week ontology that I went over there with Peter Roust and Brendan Lee.
We had Brendan on for a segment too to talk about it.
Yeah. Once. So like one of the questions in the class was like, what was the first word? Or, it's like stuff like that. What would the first word be? And I'm like, well, people are probably grunting and then, I start coming up with these concepts. But the point of it is like, does the meaning?
What was the first question?
Yeah.
Like if these are the first questions, you're like, no, the first question was probably, where is my rock?
What is the meaning? Where does the meaning come from in a word, right? And it's really this loosely figured thing that's just kind of an agreement.
Yeah, it's a rough agreement between individuals.
And it's not even, an acknowledged agreement.
Yeah.
Because we use the words with each other, even though we all probably have slightly different ideas of what the words mean. Mm-hmm. But That's why things can be in context or out of context, because you have to have context to really understand the meaning of a specific word in a specific sentence.
Yep.
But it's just the idea that language is created by this unspoken agreement amongst fellows.
Unspoken.
Yes, that agreement is unspoken. It's sort of like a gradually accepted thing.
Yeah.
Even though we don't necessarily talk. It's the development of the
I mean, there is a written agreement that we have dictionaries.
Yes, that's what this is like with the advent of scientific practices and stuff like that. We develop these dictionaries that are like, okay, we're going to lay down the meanings of these words for all.
Yeah, and what do they use to do that? Other words.
They use other words. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
So the point is that we end up with this gigantic circular thing.
Yeah, a self-referential system.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is all based on these agreements or sort of standard acceptance of concepts of things that we can't really describe. Going back to the completion idea.
Yeah.
So in one of the classes, like, Peter takes out a pistol and he has us like, well, okay, describe the pistol.
Just pulls a gun on everybody in the class.
Complete the pistol, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're trying to take away. People start saying things. Well, it's like violence and all the things you would think of, danger and evil and whatever. Power.
Yeah.
Well, none of those things are the pistol. And so it's like, okay, well, it's black, it's metal.
Yeah.
None of those things are the pistol. Mm-hmm. Right. This is all concepts that we have about the materials that the thing is made of, like geometric shapes. All of these things that we could use to describe it isn't actually it.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of grasping what he's saying in another sense, that like, even though we have all of these words that have all of these strings of concepts attached to them in our minds, every one of the words that we have in our minds is sort of a unique meaning to each an individual person. And then we string them all together and we use all of those conglomerations of concepts to describe new things that come in, right? So some new phenomenon happens and then we start to describe it using all of these words that are basically vaguely describing other things that are, that is like a massive stacks and stacks and stacks of assumptions or connections or concepts that are not accurate.
Yeah. And I remember, I think I said this in part 1 when we were reading some of his intro, which contained some of his, the introduction to his philosophy. And I was saying, I think his big problem here is with language.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's pointing it out.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
Because, and then going further with it, we talked about natural and supernatural.
Now I'm doing it. Like, while you're talking, I'm letting each word put a picture, like a context-free image in my mind. That's weird. I'm sorry.
I don't know how to do that.
I'm totally interrupting you, but like you're saying, like we're stringing things together, and there's a string, and then and things, and then together. Like if you remove them from context, you get all these weird, unconnected images.
Yeah, so you throw in all the colloquialisms and on top of the very specific definition, denitive definition words that you're using. And it's just it's a massive who knows what. But the other thing that we've talked about recently is the difference between natural and supernatural. Whereas to the scriptard, the supernatural are the things that don't actually occur, in fact.
Right.
The natural is all the things that actually do happen.
Yeah.
And then the supernatural, those things don't actually happen. It's just a bunch of people think that they happen because they don't understand the natural.
Right. Yes.
Or they're just lying or whatever. But the way we were kind of talking about it is that there is no such thing as the supernatural. There is only the natural, and yet it is, the difference is the natural that we understand and the natural that we don't.
Yeah. That's right.
Or that we don't even know is a thing.
Yeah. Right. Part of some of the very rarely used rules of the game. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like castling and chess.
Yeah.
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 Except if you're playing Kamak and using it
he
every
uses
time.
it pretty much every game.
Dang it.
Shout out to old Kamak there.
What's up, buddy?
Yeah. So another way we were talking about it was whatever, things that are natural things happen. They're right. So but the difference in the understanding of the word between the way we talk about it in terms of, that there is no such thing as supernatural, because that implies there are things that are above nature. But the actual definition of nature is like, it's
The way it is.
the stuff that happens, right? So there is no such thing as supernatural to us, except that in the commonly accepted way that the word is used, we understand it to mean things that we don't that may occur in the universe that we don't yet understand how to explain.
Yeah. And I think an even a better use for the word supernatural might be like a cell phone or the atomic bomb or the actual enriched materials that make up the nuclear bomb, right? Like they are supernatural in the sense that it took an intelligent being to do something that nature without us wouldn't have done.
Right. Yeah. You have to draw kind of a long line of saying like, well, we're part of nature, so these things are thus natural. But what you're saying makes sense too.
Yeah, you can play it either way. Like
Yeah.
I've often joked around like that. I mean, seriously, but saying that like everything that we do is actually natural.
Yeah.
Because we are part of nature.
Yeah.
And so our intelligence is part of nature, and so all the things we choose to do with intelligence and opposable thumbs is natural.
Right. And so on the other end, to the Skurptard type person, to them, natural, if in the context of the way that they use supernatural, implies that we already understand how nature works.
Yes.
Because
or at least that we understand the rules of the game, and that if you suggest something that breaks those rules, it
didn't happen. Yeah,
it did not
exactly. So they're using the word supernatural in a way that implies that we understand nature enough to say that there are such things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then people that do believe in the supernatural in the traditional sense of the word I didn't often think of the paradox
Yeah.
that the word itself presents, right?
Right.
That okay, well then if they do happen, then it's natural.
Yeah. Right. It's not supernatural. Yeah. Exactly. You're right. It does present a paradox, and I think that shows you the problems with the way the words work.
Yeah.
That people who believe in those kinds of strange phenomena still refer to them as being
They
supernatural.
still have that dividing line, which he's saying they're not the intermediateness is not present in their philosophy.
Yeah.
They have a dividing line. It's like all of these things that the physicists and the astronomers and the cosmologists and everybody says happens, those are the normal things. And then these other things that I also know happen are the supernatural.
Right.
So that they're in different categories.
Yeah.
And so they're willing to say, well, science can't discover those things, like the emailer.
Right.
Science can't actually discover those things because they're supernatural.
Yeah.
But science is a method of looking at things that happen and figuring them out.
Yeah.
So if those things happen and they can be looked at, then science can deal with them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Science is not constrained by what we think does or doesn't happen.
That's right. But it is, because we're the ones doing it.
Or you're right. Okay, I should say that.
But I know what you
the
mean.
scientific method is not actually theoretically constrained by those
That's
things.
right, yeah. In action, it is.
Yes, the actuating of the method upon things is constrained by whether or not we believe that thing is actually taking place or not.
Yeah.
But it's just like saying, a hammer can't hit this kind of object. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
A hammer can hit any object. It's whether or not the user of the hammer chooses to hit that object or not. If the user's like, that object doesn't exist, then the hammer won't hit it.
Right.
It doesn't mean the hammer can't hit it if it is really there.
Right.
So science as a tool.
You can hit a black hole with a hammer.
Absolutely.
Can you hit a hole with a hammer?
Yeah.
All right.
In a different definition of the word hit, right?
We'll have to standardize that.
Yeah.
So we are all agreeing on what hit means.
You're right. I guess a hammer can't actually hit an idea.
We should
Unless I just say, okay,
we could deliberate on the meaning of hit by describing other things.
Yeah. The way I can hit a hole with a hammer is I say, think of a hole, and bam, I hit you on the head. Right? I don't know. Okay. In 1829, in Persia, fell a substance that the people said they had never seen before. As to what it was, they had not a notion, but they saw that the sheep ate it. So they ground it into flour and made bread, which was said to have been passable enough, though insipid. So rather tasteless. That was a chance that science did not neglect. Manna was placed upon a reasonable basis, or was assimilated and reconciled with the system that had ousted the older and less nearly real system. It was said that, likely enough, manna had fallen in ancient times because it was still falling, but that there was no influence behind it, that it was a lichen from the steppes of Asia Minor, up from one place in a whirlwind and down in another place. In the American Almanac, it is said... Uh-oh, I lost my place here. Where'd it go? Here it is. In the American Almanac, it is said that this substance, unknown to the inhabitants of the region, was immediately recognized by scientists who examined it, and that the chemical analysis also identified it as a lichen. This was back in the days when chemical analysis was a god. Since then, his devotees have been shocked and disillusioned. Just how a chemical analysis could so botanize, I don't know, but it was chemical analysis who spoke, and spoke dogmatically. It seems to me that the ignorance of inhabitants, contrasting with the local knowledge of foreign scientists, is overdone. If there's anything good to eat within any distance conveniently covered by a whirlwind, inhabitants will know it. I have data of other falls in Persia and Asiatic Turkey of edible substances. They are all dogmatically said to be manna, and manna is dogmatically said to be a species of lichens from the steppes of Asia Minor. The position that I take is that this explanation was evolved in ignorance of the fall of vegetable substances or edible substances in other parts of the world, that it is the familiar attempt to explain the general in terms of the local, that if we shall have data of falls of vegetable substance in, say, Canada or India, they were not of lichens from the steppes of Asia Minor. That though all falls in Asiatic Turkey and Persia are sweepingly and conveniently called showers of manna, they have not been even all of the same substance. In one instance, the particles are said to have been seeds, though the substance that fell in 1841 and 1846 is said to have been gelatinous. And in the Bulletin of Science of Nature, it is said to have been something in lumps the size of a filbert, that had been ground into flour, that of this flour had been made bread, very attractive looking, but flavorless. Let me look this up. Filbert? A cultivated hazel tree that bears edible oval nuts. Yes, there's a very convenient, very fast word dictionary in this
that's great.
Kindle now that I can just pop it and look it up. Okay, so again, something fell. They ground it into flour. They made bread out of it. It was very nice looking bread, but it was insipid, tasteless. The great difficulty is to explain segregation in these showers, but deep sea fishes and occasional falls down to them of edible substances, bags of grain, barrels of sugar, things that had not been whirled up from one part of the ocean bottom in storms or submarine disturbances and dropped somewhere else. I suppose one thinks, but grain in bags never has fallen. But the object of Amherst, its covering like milled cloth, or barrels of corn lost from a vessel would not sink, but a host of them, clashing together after a wreck, they burst open. The corn sinks, or does when saturated. The barrel staves float longer. If there be not an overhead traffic in commodities similar to our own commodities and carried over this earth's oceans, I'm not the deep sea fish I think I am. So you get.
What does he mean?
So it's a strange way of making a comparison. Like, we've got ships that go across the sea, and there are fishes down deep in the ocean, and the fishes are just doing their fish thing. They're just down in the ocean.
Okay, yes.
But sometimes these ships that are on the surface of the sea wreck, and then they drop barrels You got it? Like, so they drop
Right.
barrels.
Yeah.
The corn, the barrels crash into each other. Eventually they break. The corn gets saturated. It falls. The barrels stay floating. And now the fish are down there and they're like, holy crap, in this one spot, all this corn fell and nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what he's saying. That's why he says,
So he's going the space aliens route.
yeah,
Or
that's
some
why he
kind
says,
of ship.
if there be not an overhead traffic in commodities,
Yeah.
similar to our own commodities carried over this Earth's oceans, then I'm not the deep sea fish that I think I am.
Yeah. I got it.
And I can't tell when I'm reading it how much tongue-in-cheek this is.
Yeah.
He's definitely got a sense of humor,
Yeah.
So he says, I have no data other than the mere suggestion of the Amherst object of bags or barrels, but my notion is that bags and barrels from a wreck on one of this Earth's oceans would, by the time they reach the bottom, no longer be recognizable as bags or barrels. That if we can have data... Huh? Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.
And that way, if we can have data of the fall of fibrous material that may have been cloth or paper or wood, we shall be satisfactory and grotesque enough. So in the year 1686, some workmen who had been fetching water from a pond 7 German miles from Memel, on returning to their work after dinner, during which there had been a snowstorm, found the flat ground around the pond covered with a coal-black, leafy mass, and a person who lived near said he had seen it fall like flakes with the snow. Some of these flake-like formations were as large as a tabletop. The mass was damp and smelt disagreeable, like rotten seaweed, but when dried, the smell went away. It tore fibrously like paper. The classic explanation? Up from one place and down in another. But what went up from one place in a whirlwind? Of course, our intermediatist acceptance is that this had been the strangest... had this been the strangest substance conceivable from the strangest other world that could be thought of, somewhere upon this earth there must be a substance similar to it, or from which it would, at least subjectively or according to description, not be easily distinguishable. Or that everything in New York City is only another degree or aspect of something or combination of things in a village from Central Africa. The novel is a challenge to vulgarization. Write something that looks new to you, but someone will point out that the thrice accursed Greeks said it long ago. I think he's speaking from experience on that
The thrice accursed Greeks.
That's right. Is that like a nod to like Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great, but the Greeks are thrice accursed? But yeah, so the other comparison he's making there is that everything in New York City is only another degree or aspect of something or combination of things in a village in Central Africa.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
That they look extremely different, but really, when you get down to their component parts, they're basically made of the same stuff
Right.
in various different aspects. So I think what he's trying to say here is like this stuff is described as being very strange, but there probably isn't. You could probably find something on planet Earth that is in some way similar.
Yeah, this is the way that the normal. What's the other term? Not the
Positivist?
Yeah, the positivist will try to find a similar thing.
Yes, that's right.
And it's that's as similar as a village in Africa is to New York City.
Right, yeah.
It's made up of the same component parts.
Right, and roughly has the same idea, right? The village is, city, village, like they kind of got the same concept as a group of people, and they have built things to live in.
Yeah, so it's like you can, the positivist can use the argument that they're the same thing or that they're very different.
Yes, that's right. Because he can draw lines.
So the
and he can
intermediate-
decide what part of the line he wants to be on.
The intermediateness person will just say, well, yes, it is all the same kind of stuff. The lines are blurred between the two.
Right. That's right.
It's almost as though the intermediateness is you can only be on one side of the argument.
Yeah. There is only one side.
Yeah. Well, yes.
There are no
The
lines
two
drawn.
sides yes, that's right. There are no lines.
Yeah, so no matter where the positivist is standing with his own imaginary lines, the intermediatist is like, yes.
They are similar. Yes, they are different.
That's right. It was cosmic that these scientists who had surrendered to and submitted to the scientific system should consistently with the principles of that system attempt to assimilate the substance that fell at Memel with some known terrestrial product. At the meeting of the Royal Irish Academy, it was brought out that there is a substance of rather rare occurrence that has been known to form in thin sheets upon marshland. It looks like greenish felt, and the substance of Memel was a damp, coal-black, leafy mass. But if broken up, the marsh substance is flake-like and it tears fibrously. So you see what he's saying? Like he's doing exactly what you're talking about. They're picking the aspects of it that match the thing that they want to match it to and ignoring the other ones. And you're right. The intermediatist would be like, yes, it does match those things.
That's right.
An elephant can be identified as a sunflower because both have long stems. A camel is indistinguishable from a peanut, if only their bumps be considered. Trouble with this book is that we'll end up a lot of an intellectual, what's this? I don't know that word at all. Roué?
It's another language.
Yeah. I think it's like similar to rogue. Yeah. So we'll be incapable of being astonished with anything. We knew to start with that science and imbecility are continuous. Nevertheless, so many, again, the intermediatist comes out here, right?
Yeah.
It's a continuous line from science to idiocy. Nevertheless, so many expressions of the merging point are at first startling. We did think that Professor Hitchcock's performance in identifying the Amherst phenomenon as a fungus was rather notable as scientific vaudeville. If we acquit him of the charge of seriousness, or that in a place where fungi are so common that before a given evening, two of them sprang up, only he, a stranger in this very fungiferous place, knew a fungus when he saw something like a fungus, if we disregard its quick liquefaction, for instance. The Royal Irishman excluded coal blackness, but included fibrousness, so that then this substance was marsh paper, which had been raised into the air by storms of wind and had again fallen. In the second act, it was said that according to M. Ehrenberg, the meteor paper was found to consist partly of vegetable matter and chiefly of coniferae. Third act, meeting of the Royal Irishman, chairs, tables, and Irishmen. Some flakes of marsh paper were exhibited. Their composition was chiefly of coniferae. This was a double inclusion, or it's the method of agreement that logicians make so much of. So no logician would be satisfied with identifying a peanut as a camel because both have humps. He demands accessory agreement, that both can live a long time without water, for instance. Now, it's not so very unreasonable, at least to the free and easy vaudeville standards that throughout this book we are considering, to think that a green substance could be snatched up from one place in a whirlwind and fall back as a black substance somewhere else. But the Royal Irishman excluded something else, and it is a datum that was as accessible to them as it is to me. That, according to Chladni, this was no little local deposition that was seen to occur by some indefinite person living near a pond somewhere. It was a tremendous fall from a vast sky area. Likely enough, all the marsh paper in the world could not have supplied it. At the same time, this substance was falling in great quantities in Norway and Pomerania, or see Kirkwood, Meteoric Astronomy, page 66. Substance like charred paper fell in Norway and other parts of northern Europe on January 31st of 1686. Or a whirlwind with a distribution as wide as that would not acceptably, I should say, have so specialized in the rare substance called marsh paper. There'd have been falls of fence rails and roofs of houses and parts of trees. Nothing is said of the occurrence of a tornado in northern Europe in January of 1686. There is record only of this one substance having fallen in various places.
Yep. Yep. They use the local to explain the phenomenon.
Yeah. And by local, they're like, there's this one little pond.
Yeah.
Around which this substance was discovered. And if we ignore certain attributes but pay attention to others, we can say, well, it looks sort of like this other stuff that is found in rare quantities, very, very small amounts in rare places. And so we can say, well, a whirlwind must have picked them up and followed. But they're ignoring not necessarily the universal at this point, but just the wider phenomenon that this stuff has fallen in enormous amounts in multiple places across years and years of time.
So I wonder how does the modern scientific community view these types of things in these papers?
I don't know.
Do they think the whirlwind idea is out? It's like, no, the whirlwinds didn't pick all this stuff up. That's ridiculous. These things didn't happen.
Yeah, I think it's usually that. Or they just don't know about them at all. Like hidden history of the human race.
Yeah.
It's just been completely forgotten. They're damned. And they were damned 100 years ago.
Gosh darn it.
And the other thing is we still have rains of fish. I mean, like that's not rare. And I see that people just accept at this point that
fish get picked up by cyclones or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm waiting for is one of these more Fortean fish falls where they come down dried or very rotten. And we'll get to some of those. He's already mentioned one where they were desiccated, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
But there are other ones where they fall and they're like in the middle of rotting. So it's like, how long have they been up there? Or they picked up, already rotten.
That's the problem is that now there's so much, there is traffic up in the sky.
Yeah.
And so it could be attributed to that.
Yes.
It's just like, okay, yeah, somebody just dumped this.
Yep. But if it's like frogs, because you're right, you could imagine that someone may be carrying a huge cargo of frozen little minnows or something, like bait fish or even food fish or whatever. But frogs or even frog eggs is weird.
Yeah.
And it's selective. Red rains have happened recently. I was trying to look this up because I recalled that there was what people were calling a blood rain that happened in India not too long ago. I need to look that up. Maybe we can read about it on the next episode.
Yeah. Well, we need to take a break.
We do.
So let's come back for the last segment in just a bit. You know, a relentless and unstoppable pursuit of Fortean phenomena here on Brothers of the Serpent podcast. This is the final segment, ladies and gentlemen, of part 3 of the book of the gosh darn it.
And we are listening to
The Prisoner from the Prisoner EP. This is the
right.
outro.
And this one is published,
Yeah.
like the other one. So you can look it up. Okay.
7-minute song.
Oh, yeah. It's a 7-minute jam.
That's right. We like those ballads.
So where did I stop here? There's record of only of this one substance having fallen in various places. Yeah. So the substance that fell in January 1686 is described as a mass of black leaves having the appearance of burnt paper, but harder and cohering and brittle. Marsh paper is not mentioned, and there is nothing said of the coniferae, which seemed so convincing to the royal Irishman. Vegetable composition is disregarded, quite as it might be by someone who might find it convenient to identify a crook-necked squash as a big fishhook. Meteorites are usually covered with a black crust, more or less scale-like. The substance of 1686 is black and scale-like. If so be convenience, leaf-likeness is scale-likeness.
So this is where it's confusing to me, because the intermediatist should have no problem with finding the likeness between such different things.
Yeah, I think he's identifying that right here.
But he's also making fun of the guy for saying, well, it must be this, lichen or whatever, even though it's so different.
Yeah, because he's saying that the only way they can do that is by ignoring a bunch of properties, and an intermediatist won't do that.
Okay.
Because that was the point he made by saying, like, I have no doubt that you can find anything on this earth that even the strangest substance from the most far off world will have things in common with something you can find on Earth.
So then the scientist goes out and finds something in common with something else.
Yeah, and then calls it that thing.
Okay, yeah, that's the problem.
That's where the problem comes in. Yeah.
It's just weird the way he approaches it is he's like makes fun of them for finding the similarities between two very different things. But then he's like, I'm an intermediatist.
Yeah.
And different things don't exist. No, he doesn't say that. That's not accurate.
Different things don't exist.
It's all
one thing.
One sort of hodgepodge of stuff.
Yeah. So in this attempt to assimilate with the conventional, we are told that the substance is a mineral mass, that it is like the black scales that cover meteorites. The scientist who made this identification was von Grotthus. He had appealed to the god chemical analysis, or the power and glory of mankind, with which we're not always so impressed, but the gods must tell us what we want them to tell us. We see again that, though nothing has identity of its own, anything can be identified as anything, or there's nothing that's not reasonable if one snoopeth not into its exclusions. There's the key.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Where do you see?
You asked this before. Where do you draw the line?
You don't.
You can't.
But we must. We must draw lines.
Yeah.
We just have to both draw lines and realize that those lines are drawn.
Yeah. And I think what he's outraged is the wrong word, but I think that, what he's just like, okay, like I understand that, lines must be drawn and that things can be categorized, but realize, number one, that those categories are for convenience,
yes,
but don't reflect reality, number one. And number two, don't fall so much in love with your ability to categorize that you allow yourself to do things like only count the black dots in the rain so that you don't have to call it red.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's his big problem. He's like, the stuff is described as a vegetable material, but they want it to be mineral in a certain case, so they don't look at the vegetable stuff at all. Yeah. Because they're wanting to categorize it as something, and they show up with a bias, This is the same thing that he was sort of pointing this out with the meteorites. These guys were proving, quote unquote, that these things that seem to fall from the sky were already on the ground and just got hit by lightning.
Right.
Okay. A writer in the Edinburgh Review says that at the time of writing, he had before him a portion of a sheet of 200 square feet of a substance that had fallen at Karelath in Silesia in 1839. Exactly similar to cotton felt, of which clothing might have been made. The god of microscopic examination had spoken. The substance consisted chiefly of coniferae. And March 16th of 1846, about the time of fall of an edible substance in Asia Minor, an olive gray powder fell at Shanghai. Under the microscope, it was seen to be an aggregation of hairs of two kinds, black ones and rather thick white ones. They were supposed to be mineral fibers, but when burned, they gave out, quote, the common ammonia smell and smoke of burnt hair or feathers, unquote.
Ammonia smell. I never made that connection with burnt hair.
Ammoniacal? Is that what he's saying here?
Can I grab one of these?
Yeah. Yeah, the ammoniacal smell of or containing ammonia. The writer described the phenomenon as a cloud of 3,800 square miles of fibers, alkali, and sand. 3,800 square miles. In a postscript, he says that other investigators with more powerful microscopes gave opinion that the fibers were not hairs and that the substance consisted chiefly of coniferae. The pathos of it, perhaps, or the dull and uninspired but courageous persistence of the scientific, everything seemingly found out is doomed to be subverted by more powerful microscopes and telescopes, by more refined and precise searching means and methods. The new pronouncements irrepressibly bobbing up, their reception always as truth at last, always the illusion of the final, very little of the intermediatist spirit. So this is, here he's kind of pointing out a version of the Manual for How the Universe Works final edition.
Yeah. And I would say that is, in many cases, much less so. Like, the tendency to do that is less today than it was back then.
Yeah. What I always think of is where we get that, where you most see that kind of thing implied today is more in scientific articles rather than in the papers and the journals.
Yeah.
But he's getting this data from journals. So.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, you got to, again, think of the division here between the religious orthodoxy that was saying, like, here's the manual for how the universe works.
Yeah.
The scientific community couldn't say, like, they weren't going to get any traction by saying, well, we really don't know how everything works.
Yeah. Yeah.
What gave them traction was like, no, here's how things actually work.
Yeah.
And here's all the observations that prove that. Mm-hmm. So they were very hardline, like, proof.
Yeah. Yep.
And now that, so they sort of won the big debate.
Yeah.
In the hearts and minds of most people.
Yeah.
Or many people.
Yeah.
And so
So they've been able to mellow out, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, to me, like the way I see things, like, I read these articles all the time. Yes, they do make references to things that are like, okay, this is absolute,
Yeah.
Yes.
Or it's a giant stack of assumptions.
That's in there, but in so many cases, the conclusion is like, this might lead to discoveries.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like it's a lot of theoretical stuff. And so it's now,
according to models.
but okay. Not in the politically charged areas, but in cosmology, for example, it's very easy to admit they don't have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. And
Whereas
the good scientists and scientist communicators will make that clear.
Yeah.
Usually that,
And because for a long time now, especially with the internet, there's been like very public debates about ideas about cosmology and all this kind of stuff. So they're more apt to admit that they just don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Fort is sort of saying that earlier on. I don't know if you remember the reference he made where that the early scientific efforts were less a real how did he put it? Less a real search for the truth and more of a rebounding off of the old theological system, like a wave crashing into a cliff, right?
Right.
Okay. Now I've lost my place again.
Sorry.
Okay, that the new that has displaced the old will itself someday be displaced, that it too will be recognized as myth stuff. That according to a report by M. Lane, or Laney, French consul at, oh man, I'm not even going to try that one. In October 1821, there was a shower of a substance resembling silk. The quantity was as tremendous as might be a whole cargo lost somewhere between Jupiter and Mars. See, he really is going for this, like, space cargo. Having drifted around perhaps for centuries, the original fabrics slowly disintegrating. It is said that samples of this substance were sent to France and that they proved to have some resemblances to silky filaments which, at certain times of year, are carried by the wind near Paris. But let me go back to this. The quantity was as tremendous as might be a whole cargo, is what Fort is saying. And again, that substance that seemed to be like an aggregation of hair and other stuff, remember that was 3,800 square miles of this material. Since the time of Darwin, the classic explanation has been that all silky substances that fall from the sky are spider webs.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
In 1832, aboard the Beagle at the mouth of La Plata River, 60 miles from land, Darwin saw an enormous number of spiders of the kind usually known as gossamer spiders, little aeronauts that cast out filaments by which the wind carries them. It's difficult to express that silky substances that have fallen to this earth were not spider webs. My own acceptance is that spider webs are the merger, that there have been falls of an externally derived silky substance, and also of the webs, or strands, rather, of aeronautic spiders indigenous to this earth. That in some instances it is impossible to distinguish one from the other. Of course, our expression upon silky substances will merge away into expressions upon other seeming textile substances, and I don't know how much better off we'll be. Except that if fabricable materials have fallen from the sky, simply to establish acceptance of that may be doing well enough in this book of first and tentative explorations. In All Year Round, it is described that a fall took place in England, September 21st, 1741, in the towns of Bradley, Selborne, and Alresford, and in a triangular space included by these three towns. The substance is described as, quote, cobwebs, unquote, but it fell in flake formation, or in flakes or rags about 1 inch broad and 5 or 6 inches long. Also, these flakes were of a relatively heavy substance. They fell with some velocity. The quantity was great. The shortest side of the triangular space is 8 miles long. It is said that there were 2 falls, that they were some hours apart, a datum that is becoming familiar to us. So again, we have marksmanship. A datum that cannot be taken into the fold unless we find it repeated over and over and over again. But it is said that the second fall lasted from 9 o'clock in the morning until nighttime. Now the hypnosis of the classic, that what we call intelligence is only an expression of inequilibrium, that when mental adjustments are made, intelligence ceases, or, of course, that intelligence is the confession of ignorance. Right?
Yeah.
If you have intelligence upon any subject, that is something you're still learning. If we agree that that which is learned is always mechanically done, in quasi-terms, of course, because nothing is ever finally learned, it was decided that this substance was spider's webs. That was adjustment. But it's not adjustment to me, so I'm afraid I shall have some intelligence in this matter. If I ever arrive at adjustment upon this subject, then upon this subject I shall be able to have no thoughts, except routine thoughts. I haven't quite yet decided absolutely everything, so I am able to point out that this substance was of quantity so enormous that it attracted wide attention when it came down, that it would have been equally noteworthy when it went up, and that there is no record of anyone in England or elsewhere having seen tons of spider webs going up in September of 1741. Further confession of intelligence upon my part, that if it be contested then that the place of origin may have been far away, but still terrestrial, Then it's that other familiar matter of incredible marksmanship again, hitting a small triangular space for hours, and then an interval of hours, then from 9 in the morning until evening in the same small triangular space. These are the disregards of the classic explanation. There is no mention of spiders having been seen to fall, but a good inclusion is that though this substance fell in good-sized flakes of considerable weight, it was viscous. In this respect, it was like cobwebs. Dogs nosing it on grass were blindfolded with it. This circumstance does strongly suggest cobwebs. Unless we can accept that in regions aloft there are vast, viscous, or gelatinous areas, and that these things passing through become daubed in them. Or perhaps we clear up the confusion in the descriptions of the substance that fell in 1841 and 1846 in Asia Minor, described in one publication as gelatinous and in another as a cereal, that it was a cereal that had passed through a gelatinous region. That the paper-like substance of Memel may have had such an experience may be indicated in that Ehrenberg found in it a gelatinous matter, which he called nostoc.
This is the stuff that grows on the ground.
Yeah, that forms a thin film.
nostoc.
Yeah.
That's right.
So he finds, that paper-like stuff that everybody else is saying it's fibrous or whatever, but he finds a little bit of gelatinous stuff in there and just calls it all nostoc. Scientific American, issue 45, page 337. A fall of a substance described as cobwebs. Latter part of October 1881 in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, and in other towns. Other towns mentioned are Green Bay and Vesburg and Fort Howard and Sheboygan and Ozaki. The aeronautic spiders are known as gossamer spiders because of the extreme lightness of the filaments that they cast out to the wind. Of the substance that fell in Wisconsin, it is said, in all instances, the webs were strong in texture and very white. The editor says, curiously enough, there is no mention in any of the reports that we have seen of the presence of spiders. The Monthly Weather Review quotes the Montgomery Advertiser that upon November 21st in 1898, numerous batches of spider web-like substance fell in Montgomery in strands and in occasional masses several inches long and several inches broad. According to the writer, it was not spider's web, but something like asbestos. Also, that it was phosphorescent. The editor of the review says that he sees no reason for doubting that these masses were cobwebs. In La Nature, 1883, a correspondent writes that he sends a sample of a substance said to have fallen at a place I can't pronounce on October 16th, 1883. According to a witness quoted by the correspondent, a thick cloud, accompanied by rain and a violent wind, had appeared. This cloud was composed of a woolly substance in lumps the size of a fist, which fell to the ground. The editor says of this substance that it was white, but it was something that had been burned. It was fibrous. He astonishes us by saying that he cannot identify this substance. We thought that anything could be identified as anything, but he can say only that the cloud in question must have been an extraordinary conglomeration. The Annual Register in 1832. In March of 1832, there fell in the fields of Koreanof, Russia, a combustible yellowish substance covering at least 2 inches thick, an area of 600 or 700 square feet. It was resinous and yellowish, so one inclines to the conventional explanation that it was pollen from pine trees, but when torn, it had the tenacity of cotton. When placed in water, it had the consistency of resin. This resin had the color of amber, was elastic like India rubber, and smelled like prepared oil mixed with wax. In the Philosophical Transactions, Volume 19 is an extract from a letter by Mr. Robert Vans of Kilkenny, Ireland, probably really mispronouncing that, dated November 15th, 1695, that there had been of late in the counties of Limerick and Tipperary, showers of a sort of matter like butter or grease, having, quote, a very stinking smell, unquote. And there follows an extract from a letter by the Bishop of Cloyne, Cloyne, don't know, upon a very odd phenomenon which was observed in Munster and Leinster. Man, I'm sure I'm butchering all these names. Sorry, Irish people. That for a good part of the spring of 1695, there fell a substance which the country people called butter. It was soft, clammy, and of a dark yellow, and that cattle fed indifferently in fields where this substance lay. It fell in lumps as big as the ends of one's finger, and it had a strong ill scent. His Grace calls it a stinking dew. In Mr. Van's letter, it is said that the butter was supposed to have medicinal properties and was gathered in pots and other vessels by some of the inhabitants of this place. In all the following volumes of Philosophical Transactions, there is no speculation upon this extraordinary subject, ostracism. The fate of this datum is a good instance of damnation, not by denial and not by explaining away, but by simple disregard. The fall is listed by Chladni and is mentioned in other catalogues, but from the absence of all inquiry and of all but formal mention, we see that it has been under excommunication as much as was ever anything by the preceding system. The datum has been buried alive. It is as irreconcilable with the modern system of dogmas as ever were geologic strata and vermiform appendix with the preceding system. As to other falls, or another fall, it is said in the American Journal of Science that in April 11th, 1832, about a month after the fall of the substance of Koryanov, fell a substance that was wine yellow, transparent, soft, and smelling like a rancid oil. M. Herman, a chemist who examined it, named it sky oil. The Edinburgh New Philosophical Journal, volume 13, mentions an unctuous substance that fell near Rotterdam in 1832. There is also an account of an oily and reddish matter that fell at Genoa in February of 1841. Altogether, most of our difficulties are problems that we should leave to later developers of supergeography, I think. A discoverer of America should leave Long Island to someone else. If there be, plying back and forth from Jupiter and Mars and Venus, superconstructions that are sometimes wrecked, we think of fuel as well as cargoes. Of course, the most convincing data would be of coal falling from the sky. Nevertheless, one does suspect that oil-burning engines were discovered ages ago in more advanced worlds, but, as I say, we should leave something to our disciples, so we'll not especially wonder whether these butter-like or oily substances were food or fuel. So we merely note that in the Scientific American, volume 24, is an account of hail that fell in the middle of April 1871 in Mississippi, in which was a substance described as turpentine. Something that tasted like orange water in hailstones around the 1st of June 1842 in France, defined as nitric acid. And hail and ashes in Ireland in 1755, and that at Elizabeth, New Jersey, June 9th, 1874, fell hail in which was a substance said by Professor Leeds of Stevens Institute to be carbonate of soda. So we are getting a little away from the lines of our composition, but it will be an important point later that so many extraordinary falls have occurred with hail, or if they were of substances that had origin upon some other part of this Earth's surface, had the hail too that origin? Our acceptance here will depend upon the number of instances.
Or was the substance the reason the hail fell because it was it caused nucleation of the ice?
Yeah, and the other thing I thought of is the way hail is formed. It keeps getting thrown back up, and so it can get bigger and bigger. So you do sort of think of it in terms of like this is already hail is already a system that can hold things aloft. Yeah, until they reach a certain weight and then they fall through.
Yeah. Wow.
We out of time?
I want to see. Yeah, I mean, we're getting there. It's kind of a short segment, but we're already 10 minutes over.
Oh, okay. This wasn't. I didn't flip this over. Okay. Forgot the sands of time for the last segment, folks.
Yeah.
Well, I can finish this segment. Right? I'll just
Yeah.
get down here.
Go for it.
Or did you have something to say?
Well, I just want more of these things to happen now when we have the observational capabilities that we have today.
So I know he says like the mathematician and the positivist is going to want to sit down and look at the dates and things. But from reading this book, I feel like what he's showing is that we went through a period of moving through materials that caused this. You know, so we'll maybe in a couple of 100 years or even sooner, we may move back into a period where suddenly weird shit like this will rain from the sky on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But he's clearly, even though he's saying you can't find a periodicity with this, what I feel like is we're looking at like a bombardment.
A longer periodicity.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Okay. As to vegetable substances in quantities so great as to suggest lost cargoes, we have a note in the Intellectual Observer, Volume 3, that upon the 1st of May in 1863, a rain fell, bringing down with it a red substance, which proved upon examination to be red meal mixed with fine sand. At various points along the Mediterranean, this substance fell. And there is, in Philosophical Transactions, Volume 16, an account of a seeming cereal said to have fallen in Wiltshire in 1686, said that some of the wheat fell enclosed in hailstones, but the writer in Transactions says that he had examined the grains and that they were nothing but seeds of ivy berries dislodged from holes and chinks where birds had hidden them. If birds still hide ivy seeds and if winds still blow, I don't see why this phenomenon has not repeated in more than 200 years since.
Yeah.
Okay. So, let's see. What are we getting into here? There's going to be more rains of cereals and grains, and he begins to talk of things that have rained down that are sort of recognizable, but that are in the middle of putrefaction or rotting. Which implies that either they had to be picked up in that state, or they were in the sky so long that if they were picked up, that they were in the sky so long that they began to putrefy before they were dropped back down. Like a fish, you know, the idea of like there's a cyclone, it picks up a bunch of fish. So unless the fish were like already on the surface of the pond or the river or whatever, the lake or even the ocean.
Which might be why they got picked up, because they were all floating.
Yeah. But then there's plenty of ones where they fall down and they're alive.
Yeah. They were all feeding on other stuff.
Yeah.
Floating.
But the stuff that they were feeding on doesn't fall with the fish.
It's a size sorting issue. That is so strange. Yeah, I don't know. How can some period of us passing through something result in like live fish falling or dead fish? It's one way to say, it's one thing to say that like, yeah, these gelatinous substances or these butter like substances were falling because we were passing through some.
Well, where did our freaking fish come from? This is what I always come back to.
What are the fish doing in those rivers up there?
Yeah. Because, you know, you think again, like from the anomalies book we read, what was that? When was that? Those episodes in the 90s or the 80s or something?
Oh, man, back in the 80s, dude.
Didn't we talk about, back in the 80s, didn't we talk about where they would find, I don't know if it was fish, but it would be snakes or frogs or things like, you know, caught in stone or concrete or even wood, you know. And in some cases they were caught in, you know, like a building that had been constructed and they knew that it had been constructed in wind, and then they were breaking up a part of it to fix it. And there's like, you know, snakes caught in this stuff. It's like, where do those come from? You know? So on those, I you know, I'm thinking of like, wow, they just teleport in. I don't know. You know, do they just appear in the sky sometimes and they were meant to fall into the water, or they were meant to spawn in the water, but they, you know, the spawning was wrong. So they reign over a village in India or something.
So weird. I would like to explore the cyclones thing? I mean, that is
Yeah.
definitely something that could be really looked into.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like if now with like all the weather
and
satellites
water spouts
and stuff,
like are a thing, right?
yeah, and we have all these satellites that are now observing this stuff, so we could actually follow
Yeah.
like a significant cyclone that could raise something up off
Yeah.
the ground and then drop it somewhere. Mm-hmm. But you don't see that. You don't see like, oh, we had all these cyclones that were going through this area, and then in this town it rained fish.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. You don't see that on the news. I don't. I just really need to work on my news feed, but
Well, we should do a search for some. Maybe we could. I mean, we could just look it up, like rains.
I did recently. Well, it was probably like a year ago or something. I was looking at ice falls, and
Yeah.
there's like I saw some actual videos of some pretty large chunks of ice falling from the sky.
Yeah.
But they were in the city, and I was thinking, well, that could have been just like a giant icicle on the roof of some high rise somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah. Those things are easier to explain than rotting fish
Right.
or butter.
Or giant flakes of hair.
That stuff even seems easier to explain than rotting fish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you
Yep.
could imagine, they have found molecules that are precursors to proteins and stuff
Yeah.
in meteoritic material.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine that there could be masses of protein-like substances that we pass through that could then
Or the
coagulate
ancients
in
were
the
right, and
atmosphere.
some of those comets are bearded.
It's just shave the beard. Yeah. But I mean, fibers.
comet got Occam's razor.
How do cobwebs even form? Right? It's fibrous materials
Yeah.
that are floating around in the air. That
And static electricity or something.
yeah, and they get stuck to each other, and they build these long things. And you're looking at the corner. You're like, I cleaned that like not too long ago, and now there's this giant thing. There's no spiders in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Though I did have a spider. I was hunting. And I was in the blind, and I kept seeing this hair floating around, and I was like, "Wow, is that mine?" I got hair, and then sometimes they're stuck on me and they're floating around. But this hair kept passing through my vision, and then I couldn't see it, and I kept looking for it, and I'm like, "Where is it?" I was grabbing for it, and eventually it like sticks to my face. Because I'm looking out this window. I have this little tiny slit window open.
Yeah.
And there's like a very slight, almost, I couldn't even hardly feel it breeze.
Yeah, a puff of breath. Yeah, the breeze.
And so this hair sticks to my face. And then I see the spider leap off the edge of the window.
Oh, he
I
was
had never
waiting for it to stick
I
to
had
something.
never seen him before, or her, or whatever. And then it sticks to my face, and then boing, this thing jumps off and starts heading towards my face.
She was waiting for it to stick to
Yes.
something.
It's like hanging on the edge of the window, and then when it finally stuck to my face,
She's like, "In I come."
All right, here we go. And then, yeah, it jumped off the window, and I saw it coming towards me, and then I lost sight of it, and I was like, but yeah, there was a spider with it.
Right.
Dumb story, but anyway.
Great story.
But yeah, I can imagine this type, like this, the cobweb type materials. There could be circumstances where these fibrous materials could be floating around and connecting with each other and being held up.
Yeah.
But rotting fish, like butter.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's so strange.
Yeah. The butter is weird. The manna, people are making bread out of this stuff.
It's in the ancient text, bro.
I
It's
know, but
happened before.
it's just like raining out of the sky, and people in modern times, in the late 1800s, are literally making bread out of it. And they're like, yeah, you can eat it. It's beautiful looking bread. Doesn't taste that great.
Yeah.
Or doesn't have much of a taste.
So weird.
So is that like really lichen, from the steppes of Asia Minor, as he said? Or even though
Like
it fell in multiple places, and it was different in composition in multiple places. But they're calling it this. They're saying it's always this lichen.
Yeah.
And that it has also fallen in like Canada and somewhere else farther away.
And you can imagine that there would be large areas where lichen, for some reason, over the course of however many years, is growing very rapidly, and then something changes, and that area becomes dry, and the lichen dies, and then there's some kind of crazy storm, and it whips it all into dust, and the dust is floating around in the stratosphere for who knows how long.
Yeah.
And then it gets wet enough somewhere but it's also being combined with other substances, so it's not the same wherever it is, and then it comes down, and because it's coming down with water, it makes like this pasty, flaky stuff or what, I don't know.
Right. And then the gooey stuff that turns into worms.
Now the worms, I don't know. It's so weird. That's what I'm saying. Some of the stuff you can kind of whip up these ideas that like, I could maybe see how, but when you combine it with the other things, you're like, I don't know.
But it's actually easier for me to, for whatever reason, to imagine that a bunch of eggs or whatever, spawn, as he calls them, frog spawn, these gelatinous masses of eggs that are actually really tiny, can be caught up in something. It's just weird that it would be so much of it. Where do you find tons and tons and tons of like frog jelly or whatever? All enough to where you can pick it up and then make it rain over a large area.
Or that it's suspended long enough for the other larvae of some worm to start eating it and hatch and start eating it, and then when it falls down, they're crawling out of it.
Yeah.
That's just crazy.
Yep.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. You can come up with explanations for some of the things like that could seem plausible, but then when you combine it with the information of other falls, then you have to consider, if those did happen, that these more mundane ones could also be not mundane.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I like that's a great, like there's a bunch of lichen somewhere, and then the climate changes there, and that stuff all dries up, and then there's a big windstorm, and it blows it all up in the air, and then it gets wet up there, and it changes, and then when it falls down, you can make bread out of it. That's pretty freaking cool. That's a good explanation. I like that one.
Coming up with them all the time. Just doing my best.
All right, folks. You can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Check out the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. Also, check out Contact at the Cabin if you're interested in going on any of these trips with us. We do have some Scablands trips coming up, and the Montana trip coming up, and also the Matheson trip. Kyle mentioned Matheson. We're doing a Star Myths trip with him in Utah. That one might be sold out, but you should still check if you're interested in going to that one. And of course, we have the Egypt trip coming up at the end of the year as well. So check out Contact the Cabin if you're interested in any of those events. They're all a lot of fun. And you're going to be at most of them, right?
Yes.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, check those out. Check out the website. Like I said, we have snakeskins there. That is the merchandise store. And I should mention again that we do have hats, and they are embroidered. And these hats are when you click on the link there on the webpage to get the hats, it will just take you to a page. It's a local company that we have an agreement with. They make the hats on demand, so you guys will make your order for it on their page. But if you want a different kind of hat than the hat they're showing, which is just your standard like trucker style or snap hat, if you want a different kind, you can just call them and tell them what you want, and they'll put the logo on anything. They've got shirts and all kinds of other materials. So if you want the logo on a polo or something, just give them a call and make your order special. They told us they would do that. And also give us reviews. I have noticed the reviews coming in. We have gone back up from 4.8 to 4.9. So thank you guys very much for all the 5-star reviews. I've been seeing lots of too much laughing, this show sucks, 5 stars. That's awesome. You guys are great for doing that. Thank you so much. And yeah, join the Discord. That is the place where all this the Snake Force hangs out. We've got a lot of members in there. You can find links to that on the website. Thanks to Jeff for running that place. There's also the Library of the Serpent, which is a huge collection of free books and links to not free books that are like material that we discuss on the show, or associated with the stuff that we talk about on the show. It's a giant library that Jeff maintains, and he also runs the Discord, so thanks to him. Thanks to History Shift, who's made all of our YouTube videos and makes the YouTube channel possible. And thanks to Soraya, also at Where Did the Road Go, and Ben from Uncharted X, and also the guys over at Grimerica, Darren and Graham, and all of you listeners out there. We love you guys.
And a special thanks and a shout out to Shawn Havasi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Executive producer of this show.
Hey,
Brothers of the Serpent, episode 231, with a $100 donation. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And also want to give a shout out to Anne. Thanks so much for your birthday donation to me for a giant pile of tacos.
Hey.
Yes, I can buy a very giant pile of tacos for that donation. I appreciate it very much, Anne.
That's what she said it was for?
Yes.
Nice.
So we love all of you.
We always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.